Bonjour à tous, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien? Is there any people who would like us to perform the panel discussion in English, or do we stay in French? So can you raise your hand if you want to stay in English? Yeah, we have several people, so we will stay in English. Thank you. C'est bon? Right, so we can start. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to lead this panel this afternoon. We are a partner of COJAS events, and it's a great honor for my association, which is in French 3ED IHEDN, to be here today. So I'm Valérie Berthaud, president of this quite old association created in 1965, and we gather a community of roughly 3,200 high professionals coming from defense and security industry, armed forces, but also defense procurement administration. And we work as a think tank in four main topics: geostrategy and sovereignty, economy of defense, technology and armament, and finally, ethic of defense. And climate change and ESG topics is one of our main topics we work on, and we have several groups who are working on those topics currently. Climate change today is a tough challenge, both political, technological, but also from a societal point of view, and it raises a lot of technical challenges as well. The GIEC, for those who know the GIEC, highlight the fact that there is a clear acceleration, generalization, and intensification on a worldwide basis of all the climate change impact. We talk about the increase of temperature and the target of 2 degrees, and maybe more than that. The CO2 emission challenges, the ocean acidification, and fire and extreme climate events. All that has a strong impact on military operations. Different new tensions, new theaters, new operational requirements, and more difficulties to perform military operations. And from a defense industry perspective, it raises many challenges in terms of innovation. Just a few words about what it means in terms of European defense industry. At the European Commission level, it's about 97 billion euros yearly of business, and 1.2 million of people, direct and indirect job in European Commission. So it's an important part of our economy, and all these contexts raise a lot of challenges. We have high-level panelists today, and I would like to warmly thank them for being with us for this panel. And let me introduce them to you. We have first Mr. Alain Alexis, who is from the European Commission, advisor at the Space and Defense Directorate, what we call usually DG Défense. We have Mr. Christian Jacques from Arcus, who is Director of Innovation. We have Mr. Bruno Delacourt, who is Marketing and Product Policy Director of Land and Air System in Thales. And finally, we have Mr. François Reptin, who is an eco-design expert in the project in engineering at the DGA, which is, in other words, the French Procurement Administration. So, high-level panelists, and let's start with the first question for this panel. And I will start with François. Which implications of climate change do you identify for your institution?
Thank you, Valérie. First, DGA is a part of the French Ministry of Armed Forces, and this question is more at ministry level. No conflict today can be attributed to the climate change alone. It has already contributed to tensions that have led to domestic conflict or crisis. And so we can say that climate change amplifies risk and threats, and has already contributed to affect international peace and security.
Can you just put the mic close to your mouth, because it's, yeah, thank you.
Okay. So this will affect the mission conditions and the capabilities of armed forces, which play an essential role in defense, but also in peacekeeping and in security and in crisis management. So the French Ministry of Armed Forces has developed a climate and defense strategy, recently published in April 2022, with different goals, and two of them are to adapt the defense tool to the climate change and to the predictable disruption. For example, for instance, the armed force deployed in a country should not be a burden for critical resources of this countries, of this host country. So the armed force should be self-consistent for this critical resource. The main example is for water or energy, and this problem, to be not a burden for host countries, will be a burden for the logistic of the armed forces. And the second goal is to continue, because it's already started, to continue to contribute to mitigate the climate change. And with ministerial energy efficiency published in 2012, the ministry already started to manage its energy consumption. And with the new strategy, the defense energy consumption, this will be applied to all the armed forces, directorates, and departments. So, two goals in this new strategy for climate and defense: adapt the defense tool and continue to mitigate the climate change.
So thank you, François. Strong commitment from the French Ministry of Defense. Let's see with Arcus what's going on.
Okay, this one is working. So hello everybody. Just a short reminder for those who may not know Arcus. Arcus is a French manufacturer of wheeled armored vehicles, and we are a subsidiary of AB Volvo Group, which is a truck manufacturer. Of course, you are most welcome on our booths on Hall 5A. First of all, concerning climate change, I think we have a company responsibility. And the Volvo Group is committed to, really committed to reach the target of the Paris Agreement. One of these targets is being neutral carbon in 2050. So now, directly for Arcus, the main challenges are energetic transition and eco-design, in which Arcus has been very active for the last 20 years, let's say, working together with French procurement agency, the DGA. We think that the defense industry must be an example in this field, as well as commercial industry. There is no exception for that. We are a leader on energy sufficiency for land vehicles. We had a first hybrid demonstrator called VAB Electer already in 2015. And on our booth, you can see the Scarabee, which is the first hybrid light armor vehicle to be commercialized today. We also lead a French working group that focuses on energy sufficiency on camps in operation. We think that the camps have to be considered as a whole system in which vehicles can be integrated and be connected. I think we don't have to think solutions only for vehicles and only for example, energy sources, but really think as a whole system where everybody can contribute. And last thing, we are deeply involved also in eco-design, in which, as we will see further, collaboration is also a key.
Yeah, we'll come back to that point a bit later. Thank you for highlighting this question of energy efficiency and energy hybridization. Let's come to Thales with Bruno. What climate change means for Thales and what are the challenges?
Thank you, Valérie. So first, let me briefly introduce Thales. Thales is an international company addressing various markets, defense, of course, but in digital identity, security, or aerospace. Thales has a purpose, which is to build a future we can all trust. So obviously, protecting the environment is a key topic for the group. And as Arcus, we are really committed to a greener world. But this, of course, comes with challenges. Defense solutions need to limit the impact, the environment impact during the use by the customers. They also need to be more resistant to severe environment. Our supply chain is also involved and needs to address the topic as well. And our daily operations need also to be more efficient to reduce the environmental impact. So as you can see, this is really a comprehensive transformation that is required. And at Thales, we started this journey a few years ago. And concretely, it materialized by evolutions of our processes. We have dedicated KPIs to monitor the progress. Evolution of our organization. We recruited dedicated people to foster environmental excellence. And it's also a lot of training because every employee can contribute to this climate challenge. Climate change also impacts recruitment, as young generations are usually very sensitive to environmental consideration. So it's important for the defense industry to demonstrate strong action in the topic to have the opportunity to attract the best talents.
Thank you for this concise overview of what is done at Thales level. And to close this first round of our panel with the European Commission, Alain.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much for invitation to take part of this discussion. I think it's good timing and quite interesting topic. Maybe if I can sum up probably 2 or 3 main political elements and to put in picture. because we have, of course, climate change. But if we look to the geopolitical situation today in Europe, we have also security. Its topic is climate change and defense. So we should not forget second aspect, which is defense. If we look to the last, let's say, 4 or 3 or 5 years, we have seen dramatic modification in terms of geostrategy. First, starting with a terrorist attack in different capitals in Europe. People discover that a war is not only on the TV on exotic country, a war can be in Europe. So following this, we had also the COVID crisis. So COVID is not defense, but COVID has been very important because with COVID, people understood the meaning of strategic independence, strategic autonomy. What does it mean, strategic autonomy? Strategic autonomy means having a stupid mask in case of COVID. Everybody understood that strategic autonomy is important. And of course, it's linked to defense. It's also linked to defense in the current situation. With the current situation in Ukraine, everybody understood that autonomy can be necessary, at least in certain domains. So when discussing climate change, we should not forget this main element, meaning that climate change is, of course, important. 20 years ago, we didn't say climate change, we say environmental protection, but now we have a new terminology, which is climate change. Of course, this is something we need to have in mind, and we need to respond to climate change. But we cannot forget the second element, which is the security of EU citizens, security of Europe, meaning that sometimes we will have to find, and maybe we can come back to this, sometimes we need to find a balance between these two priorities, security of EU citizens and climate change. Both are necessary.
Thank you. I think it summarized very well this first overview. And we cannot have any security of citizen and it goes together with a sustainable world. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the climate change challenges with eco-design. And the next question is more for our industrial fellows. What challenges, but also what are the opportunities when you deploy eco-design in your portfolio? And we will start with Bruno, if you could highlight some examples.
Of course. So let's start with the challenges, and I will piggyback on what has just been said. It's very important that eco-design does not jeopardize performance of the defense solution. There are lives at stake, the lives of the forces, the lives of the people they protect. So it's very important to continue to guarantee battlefield superiority. So typically, radars need to be able to detect the full spectrum of threats, including the newest and more difficult ones, such as ballistic missiles or hypersonic missiles. Now, to keep best-in-class performance and at the same time reduce the environmental footprint, we need to innovate. And this requires funding. So that's the second challenge. The defense industry, the European defense industry, really needs support from the MODs to fund the development of new technologies or new solutions. There is already a good momentum. We've recently seen the European Strategic Compass that make a strong commitment from the members towards this environmental excellence. But I think we can go further and faster. So more funding for innovation and maybe also more incentive in bids with selection criteria that will foster environmental excellence. This financial or economical challenge also extends to a competitiveness challenge. European defense industry are often engaged in international competition with countries that might not put the same priority for environmental consideration. So it's important to remain competitive in order to avoid the loss of market share that will drive the innovation funding. My next point will be more a stake than a challenge. In addition to financial support, the defense industry also needs adherence or support from the MODs on new solutions and new ways of working. So, for instance, we are working on simulations or digital twins that could reduce the level of physical trials that will be required to validate solutions. So that will reduce the carbon footprint, but it will require, of course, acceptance by the forces. Before moving to the second part of your question, I would also like to highlight that there are opportunities associated to eco-design. I mentioned competitiveness earlier, and there are many examples where reducing the carbon footprint will also bring operational benefits. So let's take an equipment on board a fighter. If we reduce the weight, we will reduce the fuel consumption, so we will reduce the cost of operation. It will increase the playtime, and it could even improve the performance of the aircraft, for instance, with maneuverability. So it's something to note. Now, regarding innovation opportunities in defense, there are many opportunities. Let's start with software-intensive solutions, such as control command or C4Is. We are leveraging new software architectures based on virtualization or containerization to reduce the number of servers that are needed, to reduce the electrical consumption associated. And there are also a lot of improvement that could be made on frugal algorithms, for instance, in artificial intelligence. Talking about onboard equipment, weight is a key driver. And so we are, for instance, studying biomimetic materials that will copy the structure of bones in order to reduce the weight without reducing the strength. Weight matters. We see also a lot of opportunities with drones. If you take observation or surveillance mission, if it's performed by a small UAV that is electrically powered instead of a manned aircraft, there will be also significant carbon footprint reduction. To conclude, it's not only about equipment. Services could also foster innovation. I'm thinking about improving the availability of equipment, introducing a remote assistance solution. These also will reduce the environmental footprint of the defense industry.
Thank you. So we see a lot of angles like biomimetism, power consumption reduction, weight reduction, and new features, new capabilities which are offered. From Arcus, Christian, what do you propose?
So I will try to dive a bit in the technical side of eco-design. In eco-design, we have three main activities. The first one is hazardous substances removal, which is mainly framed by a regulation, which is a European regulation called REACH. REACH is a constantly moving regulation, and it requires an efficient process. So, for example, the automotive industry has been very, very effective in implementing such a process that is also involving the whole supply chain. So how do we apply this. For example, in the AB Volvo Group, we have such a process, and we share information system with our suppliers, and we are also with the suppliers of our suppliers to take into consideration all the efforts that are made to be compliant to the REACH regulation. So how do we do Arcus? We have a supply chain which is mainly comprised in small and medium enterprises, SMEs, in France, and they are not organized or equipped to be compliant with the REACH regulation. So this is first a problem of discussing with them, implementing a process with them. We cannot implement a process like the automotive industry, but we still have to be compliant. So we have to find a way to discuss and to get the information from our supply chain to be able to be compliant. And this was a big effort from Arcus, and we took into consideration the specificity of our supply chain. The second activity is the end of life. How do we retire the vehicles from the service? So in this case, we collaborate with the French Army. We supply them data so that they can work with specific companies that are dedicated to end of service, and we provide all the data necessary to retire the vehicles. The last activity, which is the main activity for us, is the product life cycle analysis. In this case, we perform simulation with dedicated software in order to estimate and also to reduce the environmental footprint of our vehicles. So this is where we are highly active, and this is where we think there are opportunities and innovation. We want to go towards sober and greener vehicles. So if we look at the present and the very near future, for example, all our engines, they are compliant with biofuel and e-fuel. So if you want to remove fossil energy from the vehicles, it's already there. After that, there are, of course, challenges using biofuel and e-fuel, but our vehicles are already compliant with them. After that, we can talk about, of course, electromobility strategy. We have developed an expertise around hybrid drivelines. We strongly believe that hybrid is the right solution for tactical military vehicle in the short term and also in the mid-term. As you said, it's very interesting because you can combine efforts about environmental footprints and also gains in terms of operational performances. Of course, you have less consumptions, so you have a bigger autonomy. You have the possibility to have a silent mode. You can drive in a full silent mode for a few kilometers, which is very interesting, of course, for soldiers. You can also have a longer silent mode when you stay somewhere without turning the engine on. And of course, you have two engines, so if you have a failure on one engine, you still have the other one, at least to make a few kilometers and go away from a danger zone. So we have currently discussions with the French DGA to implement this technology on the Griffon, which is the new armored personnel carrier of the French Army. And the objective is to have a first hybrid demonstrator in 2025 on Griffon, and therefore be able to implement it on the serial production. We are also looking on the long term and we are pushing a project on the impacts of hydrogen integration in land vehicles. And there are several challenges about hydrogen. Energy efficiency versus weight, the supply chain in operation, of course, and also the safety. I won't develop that, but because of that, I don't see a massive use of hydrogen on land vehicles in the near future. But at least our role is to try to, let's say, debug the situation and see how hydrogen could be used. I don't know when, 2040, 50, maybe more.
Let's see. Thank you for this great vision from substances to supply chain management to dismantling activities, but also embedding environmental footprint and improvement in the product life cycle, and for sure, energy hybridization. Let's move to the French procurement agency, French DGA, with François. As you are an eco-design expert, what is your view on this topic?
So a lot of things has already been said by my colleagues, but what can I add is that for DGA, the environmental issues and the climate change are contributing to the risk in armament programs. Risk for delay, risk for overcost, risk for performances, and also risk for availability of equipment. So the eco-design approach of DGA was in two steps. In the early 2000s, we look first on the environmental regulations, and the goal was to anticipate this regulation and transpose into a specification of weapon system this new regulation. Anticipation is a key word because we are using equipment for a very long time, 30-40 years, and the regulation is continuously evolving. Then this approach has been increased in a second step, taking in account the footprint, and this is for the most recent programs. This will include environmental impact analysis over the life cycle of system, from the manufacturing to the end of life. In fact, if we come back to the footprint, there is a variety of footprint, environmental footprint. It could be use of critical material, use of water, use of energy, acidification of ocean. But considering we are using during a very long time our equipment, the main one is in fact the energy consumption. And this energy consumption is linked to the greenhouse gas and carbon dioxide emission, and then linked to the climate change. So when we work on this footprint, we also work to mitigate the climate change. Of course, this objective to decrease the footprint, and it has been said already, must not jeopardize the performances of the equipment. So the defense energy strategy adopted in 2020 aims to control the fossil fuel consumption and increase the energy efficiency. And it is in this way contribute to the mitigation effort. And what you have already give, for instances, is part of what we are doing with industry. Of course, we have to work with industry for eco-design. I can add some other example. We are using for several years small ships with hybrid propulsion, and the feedback we have during these years of exercise is that the energy consumption is at 80% electrical with recharge at the dock. And in France, as electrical power is low carbon, so it's contribute to climate change. There is also example of hybrid armored vehicle, but it's already we have already spoken about that. And the last point is, of course, hydrogen. Hydrogen is one of the study we have to look if it's possible to use this energy, which is not a primary energy, if we can use it in external operation. And the main problem, in addition of problem what we can see in the civilian with the civilian technology, with the use of this of hydrogen in civil, is the problem is the logistic, because we have to transport and storage hydrogen in a secure way, and it's a challenge.
Thank you. I propose to switch to the next topic for our panel, and next and last topic. It's about your international regulation about your environmental challenges. We've seen popping up new regulation at the international level, at the European level, with the green taxonomy, the green label. And so the question is for Alain. Which challenges for European defense industry taking into account those new regulations?
Well, climate change is a reality. We will not change the world. It's a reality, and so the European industry has to adapt. We have no choice. We can complain, but it doesn't change the reality. We have all to make an effort to adapt. So we can consider this as a problem. Or, as it has been said, we can consider this as a huge opportunity for European industry. I think we need to be positive. This is an opportunity for European industry, because climate change is not limited to Europe. It's a worldwide problem. So if we want to have a competitive defense industry, there is a huge market for European industry. Let's invest in this. Let's invest in this. This is the future of European industry. Of course, competitiveness means putting money on the table, no? Because if we want to be competitive, we need to conduct research. And here, this is why at EU level we put in place a program to support industry, not only European, not only defense industry, but all the industry, but with specific program for defense, which is the European Defense Fund. With European Defense Fund, we support research and development. And we have just published a call 2 days ago for 2022. And what we propose a program for only for climate change. We have 20 million for 22. So, and we will support company to conduct specific project for climate change. Next year we will have a new call. So meaning that for a period of the next 5 years, every year we will have a specific program for climate change to support the industry. Of course, we will not support all costs, depending on the category. For research, normal research, we can support total eligible cost. For development, it can be between 20 and 70%, but nevertheless, it's already something. Second element is, of course, what we have to keep in mind is probably defense industry in Europe doesn't exist. We have always dual industry, except one specific company for missile, which is more British than French. All the industry is dual. So meaning that every euro we put in research will benefit both for civil and defense. So it's a good investment. Having in mind what when we say industry, we say company, and we say jobs. So we will create jobs in Europe. So let's invest in dual. And the third element to reply to your question also on the question of taxonomy. Here again, as I said in introduction, we need to be coherent. We need to be coherent. We cannot say defense is a priority, but we just forget defense when we discuss taxonomy. No, we need to have in mind, to keep in mind the two priorities. Meaning that defense is a priority for Europe. Meaning that so we cannot exclude per se defense from taxonomy, from green economy, from green support, just because it is defense, of course. Defense, it's, the objective is to develop capability, to develop arms. And of course, with arms, we can kill people. But this is part of the objective. It's part of security of people. So we cannot just say, well, it's arms, quelle horreur. We do not support defense industry. No. This is why in the last communication of the Commission adopted two weeks ago, we clearly say that when discussing taxonomy, when discussing green economy, we will take into consideration other priorities and notably defense.
Thank you. Very clear message. There is a consistency between safety of our citizens and also sustainability. So who wants to react with a short comment? Maybe François, before we leave the floor to a question from the audience.
So it's okay. So of course the regularly context and what is happened in the climate change and the mitigation is opportunity. I agree with that, but we have, as explained previously, we have to guarantee the continuity of military activities, and in this context, we need knowledge, we need anticipation. I already said that. And we also need the possibility of defending a specific defense need. And the goal is not to refuse this evolution. We will go in this evolution. We will change our way of developing equipment. But sometimes we need to defend the specific need of defense, and that's why DGA is also working with other ministry in France. Ministry of Armed Forces working with Ministry of Ecologic Transition. And we are following the preparation of future regulation, and in this way we can see what is affordable, what we can which regulation we can accept, and we can adapt, and sometimes it could bring us some important advantage. But in our case, we have to take care of some specific defense needs where we can't follow the regulation.
Okay. So on one hand, there is at the European level, seen from European level, there are only dual industries, and when we support, when we put money on the table to support R&D, it's both for defense purposes but also civilian purposes. And but we need also to keep in mind the specificities of defense needs. So I think that we will need to find the right balance between the two. Maybe a word of conclusions from our two people from industry. Short word of conclusion before we leave we open the questions with the audience.
Okay, I'll just take an example concerning what has been said by François. For example, there is a big trend in EU regulation to ban thermal engines. It will be the case in 2035 for the personal cars, but there is also thoughts about banning thermal engines for trucks. In this case, I don't know exactly how we will do for military vehicles, because, as I said, we want to have hybrid solutions. Hybrid solutions means using a thermal engine. So if there is nobody investing in thermal engine in Europe, how do we do that? That's a challenge. I don't have the answer yet, but that's the example of an impact of EU regulation on the defense industry.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will again piggyback on what Alain said. Reducing our environmental footprint is mandatory. The planet just needs it. And the good thing is the industry, the defense industry, can play its part on the topic. It requires innovation. It requires transformation. Both will need the support of the MODs. But we can do things about that, and it's also important that the regulators take into account the specificities of the industry.
Thank you. It's time to leave you the floor if you have questions before we close this panel. Any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Yes?
Thank you. Maybe concerning the European Commission, you said there was a first call starting with 20 million of euros. Do you think there will be other initiatives in the next years, and how do you plan to stimulate the industry, the European industry, to innovate in this field? Please.
As you know, legally speaking, we are obliged to adopt what we call annual work program, which is not the best approach, but it's part of a regulation. But in the meantime, we have identified a pluriannual approach, a document which is now public, in which we identify domains that we want to support over the next 3 or 4 years. And climate change is part of this. Of course, we have not yet identified technically which project we want to support. So I do realize that when we say climate change, it's not very useful because its scope is so broad, but definitely it will be there. And in the meantime, we will support energy efficiency. So scope is more limited, but definitely it will be there.
Any other question? So just one word, what would be your advice to the European industry in 1 or 2 words to conclude? And we start with Christian.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I'm well placed to advise the European industry, but at least once again I will come back to a lot of things that have been said. Think about opportunities more than threats, and also putting defense as a priority means taking into consideration defense needs, and it's not only words but also acts. So we have to, let's say, I don't like the word, but lobby to make defense needs be taken into consideration.
And to lobby, it's a joint action, and it relies on cooperation.
Exactly.
From you, Bruno?
they could be the first reaction to say we need to protect performance, and so we cannot do anything about climate change in defense. But in fact, if we look in more details, there are a lot of things that can be done. So it's really a matter of commitment and looking for all these opportunities. So let's start the journey.
Thank you. And
so, a possible advice to industry is to follow as much as possible civilian world, especially on regulation, and as much as possible, and we will look especially on the specific defense need to protect them.
And so the last word from the European Commission.
I don't want to be particularly nice with European industry, but we should recognize that we have a strong asset in Europe, and we have European industry which is very competitive. So starting point is very good. So we need to continue. We need to support the industry, and because I think it's part. When we put the money of a taxpayer, it's not a waste of money. It's an investment, and what we say when we support, we say we support the industry to conduct research. Actually, we do not support the industry. We support security, and we ask the industry to conduct research because it is a general interest, and so we need to continue in this direction. And a last word we did not have time to discuss, but which is linked to skill.
Yeah.
Because of course we can say to company conduct research, yes, but we need people. We need good skill, and probably this is a domain where we should do more. Because normally companies say we have difficulty to recruit good people, and all companies say this. Question is, what can we do? I do not have a reply today, but I think this is something on which we need to continue working.
Definitely. So I would like to warmly thank our 4 panelists for their insights on climate change impact on defense industry. To warmly thank also our audience. Thank you for your questions and attention. And it's time to conclude. We are perfectly on time. Thank you.